Good morning, everyone. It's very strange to speak to you and not hear myself. I can see on your faces that you can indeed hear me properly. I'm delighted to be here with you. My name is Marialya BESTOUGEFF. I am the director of the 104 factory. We are in the northeast of Paris in the 19th arrondissement, and I am the director for innovation in this art, culture, and innovation site. And I am delighted here to talk about transformation. What is the transformation of cultural places and museums? How do we transform ourselves? At the 104, we transform all the time. Transformation is a permanent way that we approach things with our publics, with the artists that we support. We have more than 300 artists that we welcome and host every year, but also our entrepreneurs and our companies in the room. We have Fanny, who is one of the companies that is part of our incubator, and in the room we also have Efren, who is managing the incubator of 104 Factory. To transform ourselves, we need to be in contact with various publics, our users, because we are in an atypical space where people come and practice. It's a place that you live. It's 48,000 meters squared. It's quite broad. We are in a big hall. So why are people living there? It's because there's a lot of spontaneous practice. A lot of young people come to practice their art in our space. It's dance, it's music, it's juggling, it's theater. They come and they practice, and we transform ourselves because of them, because we welcome these artists and all of these different projects. Currently, we're preparing two exhibitions. Circulation, which is a festival on young European photography, and an exhibition of Clément Cogitor that takes place in parallel. I was told that there was a zapper. So you can see the place where we're at. It's a space in the 19th arrondissement that is very horizontal, and you can see it on these pictures. We have a lot of towers. We are in a neighborhood that's very specific in the city of Paris, where there's a lot of unemployment, where there's a lot of issues, and it's a space where everything is possible. We don't prohibit anything, and we do a lot of actions with the actors of the territory. And you will see through the conferences this morning how museums transform with new skills. And these new skills, these new people, are the people that surround us, that revolve around our institution. It is the case for us at 104. We've got a lot of projects that are brought by associations. We're working with about 90 associations in the neighborhood to develop specific artistic programs. And in May, we've got the Forum of Cultural Dynamics, where you can see the results of all of this work that we carried out with these associations, with these schools. And it's impressive to see the quality of what is being produced by people who are not cultural professionals, but who are very involved and very engaged. And that's what we'll see in the conferences this morning. How can we get these players of the territory really engaged? And we will show you examples of this. So as I've mentioned, transformation is a permanent state for us in our space, which is an urban space that is a living space. We have many services. I said that people could rehearse. They could use the space as they wish. We also have places to eat. We have services that are very specific that we give to our users. For instance, the House of the Little Ones. It is a space that is dedicated to children from 0 to 5 and the families. And my colleagues who work there are all psychologists. When I wasn't working with 104, I was fortunate to go there several times. And a museum may have a different role to play with regard to different publics. and we will talk about the link that exists this morning between the cultural environment and institutions and the medical environment. So you can talk to my psychologist colleagues or not. You can just enjoy a moment with your child. It's quite unique. It was done based on a model that you might know, which is the greenhouse one. And it's very inspirational, and it's crazy to say that you're working every day in a space that does so many different things. So there are cafes we can eat. There's also an organic market on Saturday mornings. We are delighted to be in a trade fair. You know that we're going through a complicated period. That is the pandemic. And during the pandemic, we were a vaccination center. So you can see that transformation, the link with the medical, can go very far in a cultural institution. We were one of the vaccination centers in Paris, and we weren't considered as essential as a cultural space. We did vaccinate more than 103,000 people, and it's more than 47 people of our teams that were involved with this vaccination center. We worked hand in hand with healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, and people in charge of the vaccination center. And I spoke about the House of the Little Ones, this space that is linked to little ones. It's a topic that we're also going to discuss this morning, how we can transform a museum by using new skills and skills that are linked to the medical environment. I spoke about the link with the territory and how we transform because of this. This is a project that we have with a programming that is different from the usual exhibition or the usual show. This is a salsa hip-hop battle. It's very popular. A lot of people from the neighborhood come to see this. It's very fun, and it's something that we carry out with the players of the territories. Transformation is essential for us as a cultural space and for museums, and we can see how we can do this with the players that can be committed, and how we can also have new competencies through pro bono work. So it is a moment that I'd like to share with you and with all of our guests who are present for these roundtables. I think that now I need to give the floor to Juliette RAOUL DUVAL, who is going to talk about another topic. I'd like to confirm what you're saying. It is very odd to not hear you earlier, and I want to confirm that 104 is an atypical place, and it's worth it if you're in Paris to go and visit this. I was asked to talk about commitment, so I'm going to talk about commitment. So a few words. My name is Juliette RAOUL DUVAL. My whole professional life was spent in museums, especially with the museums of Arts et Métiers. And today I'm president of the International Committee of Museums. This is an organization that federates and creates a link between museums throughout the world, because this is an organization with 50,000 members in 134 countries, and it has national committees. And I'm the president of the French National Committee, which is one of the largest committee of this international organization that is tied to UNESCO. We have 5,600 members who are all museums or museum institutions. We're all a link between museum professionals, and we build debates around questions that are the most important and that the museums wonder about in their daily operations. I've brought some of the publishings that we do, and you can find them in our booth. So I was asked to talk about engagement. We can consider that it's a rather new world in the language of museums, but today it's something that it cannot be split from their missions. In engagement, there's what we do because we're intimately convinced, but what we also promise to do because the position that we have means that we're well placed to act, and when acting becomes essential, which is the case today, we need to do it, and we are facing imperatives today, and we'll discuss this. I think it is today our responsibility to broach some topics that in less troubled times we used to leave to others by focusing ourselves on what we wanted to do more than what we had a duty of doing. We've heard a lot at the beginning of the pandemic that culture was not essential. Marialya said it, and it was something that was very wounding in a sense. And I feel that the demonstration was made that quite the contrary, culture was essential, and it became really very central in the current period. And I want to mention a moment with this climate crisis that we went through that removed all of the doubts to those who had about the emergency of acting for the climate. This summer, there was a G20 of the ministers of culture in Rome that recognized museums among the most credible institutions, and that is very flattering. And we want to keep in mind more than the recognition of our credibility. This is a duty to be engaged, to inform, to show, to give our visitors reliable and validated information, to debunk false information, because we are the guarantors, due to our credibility, of what the visitors find within our institutions. We need to provide this information for everyone. We talk a lot about inclusiveness. There are things that we need to share, and I'm thinking about sustainability in the sense of the UN and the Agenda 2030, and go and see it if you don't know. It doesn't talk just about climate. It says that our living together so that we can continue to live together for our development to continue to remain sustainable. You need to think about equal access to all of the resources of the planet. Energy, but not just health, work, happiness that we can find within 104. As an institution that is credible, we have a duty to be virtuous in our practice and eco-responsible, and that is obvious, and you will broach it later on in the program that was organized by our organizers that I really want to recognize because they've done some remarkable work to prepare. We need to be exemplary. We need to reduce our carbon footprint. But in parallel, we also need to broaden our mental footprint. We need to deliver a message. We need to mobilize all of our fundamentals for this. What are our fundamentals within a museum? Well, it's our collections. It's our capacity to mediate. It's our aptness to create interest and emotion, to make people understand and to increase and accentuate awareness and to improve a critical mindset and to learn. Whether the museum is art or science or natural history, memory, society, in every museum you have collections that illustrate what duration means. There are collections that we've had for so long that they've witnessed our entire history. And in all of the collections of the museum, we have objects and artifacts that illustrate the fragility of our lives, the fragility of nature and society, and that remind us that survival eras, disease, war requires will and intelligence. Survival requires intelligence, and it is time to prove our inventiveness, to go and dig patrimonially. So we have models that help us to preserve. I'm saying that we shouldn't just do this. It would be stupid, but I'm just suggesting that everybody in their cultural equipment, if you will, whatever their business, needs to take their part in this, however modest. You will broach this later in your discussions and your debates. This meeting today goes through key points, and the duty to impact publics that are very varied, that come from all corners of society, and some that are the furthest away. It is the zeitgeist to talk about inclusiveness or saying that we're accessible to all. Saying it is easy, doing it is much, much harder, because a lot of people feel that they don't have a space for themselves in cultural spaces. So let us hope that moments 1 and 2 of our program will lead to concrete proposals. So I'm thinking out loud, I'm giving you lines, but I will make you work concretely. We need to look at approaches, and we're thinking about all of the potentialities that are open with the COVID crisis, the digital on all aspects, from virtual visits to the expositions that were immersive and augmented reality. You might have participants to say if digital is ecological or not. That's a real question. And to give you useful indications of good use, you'll be able to say if this is inclusive or not. Audrey Azoulay at UNESCO always says that maybe 5% of men and women in the world have access to digital. So we need to really think about it if it's that accessible. And that will also be the issue of one of the times today.
Virtuel.
So looking at virtual, it's not losing contact with reality. We can't lose contact with reality, because if works of art leave tangible traces of men and women and their lives, conveying them, sharing them is vital. Restoring them is how you guarantee is the guarantor of their authenticity. And that's what museums do. They're the guarantors of the narrative, the discourse. That's what today's museums do very well, with temporary exhibits that have been going on for decades. They bring objects together and they put things side by side that make sense, and they forge more and more robust knowledge. Exhibits with the staging and everything that accompanies, that helps you memorize the knowledge, the emotions. You'll be talking about emotions today, but those are today's museums. But tomorrow's museums, will they be more digital? Will they be more tangible, less tangible? It's a very important issue to look at. It's about mobilizing our emotions and our memory of valid knowledge. We have to find the right hybrid model. We can't forget all of this. This is just giving you some avenues for development. Let me also remind you that LEIPOLD, the organization I belong to, was created in 1946, just after World War II. It was created in Paris, now 135 member countries in Paris, and its inception was by people who are convinced that museums are instruments of peace, because they leave traces and they house our memories, and it's really important to keep that in mind. In France, you'll see that if you look on our website, we are committed in solidarity actions, as we have been for many years. Collective engagement, collective commitment, that's the strength of networks. That's what we've been doing. And today we are committing in many other areas. Sustainable development. We are highly committed to sustainable development. And over the past month, we have become committed, of course, in solidarity with our colleagues in Ukraine. We have called on all French museums to give donations to the museums in Ukraine, what they need to protect the memory. I've been talking about the objects the items that we will need to, when the war stops, because the war will stop at some point, but we have to maintain the cultural heritage of this country, because that's being targeted right now. Don't think that the bombs are falling randomly. They're falling where people's memories are, because that's destroying what they have that is the most precious. So we've collected items to wrap and protect the collections. And I'll finish up on this. Over the past week, French museums across the country, many of you are here, you sent 30 tons of materials to protect the artwork in these museums. And we'd already sent 15 through a delivering company that we all know with to Poland, and that was to then be distributed to Ukraine. So that's commitment. You'll be talking about commitment all day long, and you'll see that's something that I find very important. Thank you for having listened to me.
Oh my God. Bonjour.
Hello, everyone.
It is strange not hearing yourself. So unfortunately, I will now have to switch to English as I forgot most of my French. So my name is Kristina LEIPOLD. I'm the commercial director of Light Art Space, or LAS, as you can see here. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Claire and Annabelle, for inviting me to this year's Inspiration Board and giving me the opportunity to attend this conference. It's a real pleasure, and it's very inspiring to be here and to discuss what drives cultural institutions today and in the future. I'd like to take this opportunity to briefly introduce our organization, LAS. So as we have the ambition to become an innovative and future-oriented institution. After that, I'll present this year's key innovation topics. LAS is a private, maybe just go to the next slide. Thank you. So LAS is a private non-profit art foundation based in Berlin. I can do it myself. Okay, thank you. We were founded in 2016 and presented our first exhibition at the end of 2019. As of today, we don't have a physical home, but we are nomadic. So we are renting spaces across the city to show our program as we see fit. So we are rather young art institution and still in the process of building and shaping it. Building an organization from scratch is both a challenge and a luxury. It definitely allows us to ask big questions, such as, what should an art institution in 2050 look like? Is there already an institutional model that fits us, or do we want to come up with something completely new? How do we really need a permanent physical home? How can we reach and engage with a more and more diverse audience in the physical as well as in the digital space? How can we best support artistic practice and offer artists access to the latest technologies? So many questions. LAS bridges art, technology, and science. Connecting these three fields opens up new interdisciplinary perspectives and enables the questioning of limits and perceptions. All our activities are centered around the future as the key topic. Our ambition is to constantly reinvent art through new exhibition formats and experimental projects. We aim to make the present tangible and the future visible. In doing so, we want to initiate a broad discussion about our future as a society. To support an open, interdisciplinary dialogue, we want to make art accessible to all. Let's quickly see. Oh, okay. So LAS was founded with the mission of transforming art from the exclusive to the inclusive and translating scientific topics into a language everyone can understand. With this in mind, LAS is committed to break down barriers of the conventional, for example, by disrupting the public sphere, by working with latest technologies, and by including the digital space to its fullest capacity. The art we present speaks to all, to art newbies and experts, to families, seniors and urbanists, to Berliners and tourists. So our curiosity for the unconventional leads us to the pioneering and emerging artists that bring new topics or methods, such as artificial intelligence or machine learning, into the art sphere. So because pictures say more than words, here's a brief glimpse at our program to date. the year of the pandemic, we went very digital, I guess as many of us. So this is our current exhibition in Berlin. So if any one of you planning to come to Berlin, you're warmly welcome. Okay. So over to the next topic. Let's quickly change. So now briefly to the topics of innovation, which you will hear a lot more about today and tomorrow. The metaverse. It seems to be one of today's buzzwords, which is on everyone's lips as the next step in the evolution of the internet. The rather vague promise of this concept, which is still at its infancy, is that the metaverse will be a virtual world that parallels our real life and will change the way we live. That is, work, play, and hang out. This virtual world will feature immersive experiences that marry a variety of existing technologies, such as VR, AR, and 3D computing. However, neither its term, nor its idea, nor its technology behind are new. What has changed is a shift in understanding, namely the conviction that the internet needs to be reimagined. Looking at the current hype and the many brands and tech corporations, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, Epic, and so on, are dreaming up new ways of connecting online, it seems sure that there is money to be made, that it will transform entertainment, and we can't avoid dealing with it. From the point of view of a cultural institution, there are still many questions to be answered. So what potential does the metaverse hold for museums and the cultural world? How could it enhance the museum experience? And in general, why does it make sense for museums to take a closer look at it? Another topic that will be discussed today and tomorrow, innovative fundraising. So constantly looking for new and creative ways to fundraise is essential for any cultural institution. It's great to see that hybrid cultural operations, likely fueled by the pandemic and its lockdowns, also offer new hybrid fundraising opportunities. Just to name one that has also been talked about a lot in recent months is NFTs. So-called non-fungible tokens. Simply put, NFTs make it technically possible for digital assets to be owned and traded. Museums have been already started exploring possibilities of crypto collectibles for revenue generation, as well as for sourcing funds for social impact projects. We have seen several examples, seemingly successful from the outside perspective, of museums such as the Uffizi Gallery, the British Museum, the Belvedere, and the Hermitage, selling ownership of digital copies of their collections. But questions and concerns with regards to image licensing and copyright remain. So I'm curious to hear more about the pros and cons during the upcoming discussions. And last but not least, experts will discuss the innovative potential of the traditional museum gift shop in the next 2 days. How to ensure that museums retail stays an important revenue source. It probably makes sense to take a look at the existing customer and their preferences. Where and how do they like to shop? Can customers be picked up where they spend most of their time, not in the museum but outside of it? Where would they be? What does the shop's range have to offer, and how does it have to be offered in order to get new customers? What can new innovative cultural retail formats look like? So many questions, and it will be interesting to discuss best practices and hear from other museum actors how they deal with this. So this is all from my side for now. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a very informative and inspiring conference.
So thank you very much, Mrs. RAOUL DUVAL, Mrs. LEIPOLD, Mrs. BESTOUGEFF, for these inspiring introductions. So I'm very honored to welcome now Mrs. Sharon AMENT, who is the director of the Museum of London. So please, Sharon. So Sharon, you joined the Museum of London in 2012. and you are currently leading the process of a new Museum of London, which is very exciting. So with Sharon, we are going to question the criteria of success of a cultural institution, and Sharon is also going to tell us about the project of the new Museum of London. So Sharon is going to share her thoughts on new criteria of success, and then she will discuss that matter with Juliette RAOUL DUVAL, Marialya BESTOUGEFF, and Kristina LEIPOLD. So, dear Sharon, can we still work with the same old definitions of success, or should we change our way to envisage criteria of success?
Well, let's see how this conversation goes. I need 3 hands.
Sorry, you need another microphone? Can I get
So, thank you. Now you can all hear me. Okay. Ici, au début, une grande part.
So first of all, I'm sorry to you all. I'm learning French, but my French, I don't believe, is good enough to give you a talk in public. So I'm now going to switch over to English. So here, what if?
What if cultural venues redefined success? With a pandemic shock to the system, in many countries, museum attendance has decreased, resulting in a rebalancing of priorities and a refocus towards new audiences. But really, it's more than that, isn't it? It's more than this awful pandemic. It's a climate crisis, as people have discussed. The race to become net carbon zero. The imperative to be equitable, diverse and inclusive. To be socially just. The driver of democracy. Living in open and questioning societies, participating in an evidence-based culture, contrary to the fears and desires of tyrants. And who would have thought I'd be talking about tyrants at this time? Like this woman, I have been thinking hard. I was thinking about this talk when I first framed it. It was about the shift that is being demanded in reaction to the pandemic, the first in my lifetime, but as we know, it has occurred in centuries past. In the face of these challenges, can we still work with the same criteria of definitions of success? Or could we and should we change our criteria completely? What if we took a deep breath and changed from quantity to quality, from performance to key impact? What if we chose this moment to do what we've been itching to do for a long time now? How might we be better for the health of our organisations and our societies? And I know that I'm not the only one talking and thinking about this, as you've seen. There's hard evidence, of course, across much of the world that people are thinking and asking the same questions about their own lives, the world in which we live, the organisations in which we work and engage. And we're thinking hard about what we have to pass on to the next generations, to our children, and actually to other species. We have a global responsibility. And in my small part of the world of museums, I've been asking, what if? AC. What if we could do things differently? And I'm here to show you how we're doing it in the Museum of London and how we're part of a big discourse in London. I don't have all the answers, and I think that is the answer. We have to keep in conversation with each other and society to arrive at and to continually be in the process of arriving at a better society. So, as you heard, I'm Sharon AMENT. I am the director of the Museum of London, but it will soon be the London Museum. This background of this slide is the door to one of the buildings that we will soon be occupying. And like Centquatre, we are going to a place that had a former life. It was something else before it's going to be a museum. And all of the images you see in my talk today come from our collection, the London collection. They are part of our museum, they're our people, and they're an indication of the work that we've been doing. Quite simply, in the face of all of what we are experiencing now, we have to leave our old ideas and ways of being behind us. Otherwise, the flies on the hat of this paper merchant, like these flies, this is an illustration by Gustave Doré from 1872. If we don't change ourselves, we will be stuck. I think fly paper in French is papier tumouche. I didn't know that before. We will be captured, unable to move, making a lot of noise but going nowhere. These fly papers were sold by street traders such as this, by the poor in London. They would catch the flies and stick them to the paper on their hats. A less compelling trade that could be recorded. A less than compelling trade, sorry. It was a terrible thing for poor people to do. The times we're living in really demand this change. And museums, as we've heard, know a lot about time. Time. We're very familiar with it. It's been something we're comfortable with in museums. And until now, it's been very steady. Time is the dimension in which museums work the most. When was an object accessioned? When was it made? When was it invented? When did it live? What year? What century? What epoch? What period? All of which, of course, is a very Western view of the world and time. We also think about opening times, school visiting times, peak holiday times, seasons, development times, construction times, quarantine times, and on it goes. It's like we had all the time in the world, right? The description of this watch exemplifies how museums think. When I looked it up on our database, it's described as a post-medieval pocket watch, 1702. Post-medieval? I mean, is this the most compelling thing about this object in the title? No, it's not. When you read further, and this is exactly the problem. This pocket watch was manufactured by the French watchmaker David Lesturgeon. He emigrated to London from Rouen in around 1681. Lesturgeon, a Huguenot, worshipped at one of the French churches in Spitalfields, a part of London. The Huguenots brought with them to London important knowledge and skills from major French clock and watchmaking centres. Now that's what's really interesting. Not that it's a post-medieval watch. It should say much more in the title about that object. And of course, what a wonderful example of the value of immigration, the value of people fleeing from tyranny today. In museums, we used to have the luxury of focusing on what we were interested in. I think sometimes we are still like this. In fact, there was a television game show on the BBC in the late 1950s called Animal, Vegetable and Mineral. Here is a panel of experts, including one of my predecessors, Mortimer Wheeler. My goodness, I think all museum curators in that time were all men like that, I'm sure. Very particular, very expert, and women have made their way into it. And I think this has summed up what curators were like and could be like. But here are two pictures of curators today. Jelena Beklovic and Hazel Forsyth, my colleagues. Their deep expertise is not driven by personal interest, although they do look a bit obsessed with their objects, don't they? They're driven by societal questions, as well as pure historical inquiry. Jelena is a specialist in human osteology. She engages with many topics, including public health, and uses our 20,000 collection of human skeletons to search and explore questions that are really relevant today. And that is, even the important work of Jelena and Hazel has now taken on this new meaning, a new urgency and a new sense of significance, because we are all at an individual, organisational and at societal level, we are now more conscious of time. Time is running out. There's a climate crisis. We keep on hearing this. We've got to do something before it's too late. And this sense of urgency, if we're not thinking about it, the young people in our societies are. And quite frankly, no matter how much we'd like to get back to what it was like before, there is simply no escape. We must face up to what is happening all around us. So, what if? What if we in the international museum community embraced this big scary thing and looked at it head on, in the eye, like this boy here, photographed by Fred Wilfred in the 1960s. In fact, what if we face the onslaught with the tenderness of this boy who is stroking the nose of the horse, a working horse that he found on the streets of London? What if we saw these events as a gift, a reason to rethink and to respond to the demands of the world around us? In Europe, we have been shaken out of our obsessions with ourselves. That luxury has gone. There is an urgency, an imperative, and an opportunity. Chasing big numbers is not enough, is not going to be our place in the world where we can be the most effective. And let's face it, for our young people like these, such as these children in the 1960s in Notting Hill in London, we need to meet them. They're looking at the world with open eyes and curiosity, and it's for them that we need to do this work. So what if we stop chasing ourselves? What if we stop measuring big numbers? What if we thought about a new social and economic models? And this is what we're doing in the Museum of London. And we started with our mission. Our mission is here, but the most important thing to focus on is that we've added those two lines at the bottom. In so doing, we must aspire to be a force for good in London, as London must be for the world. Blimey, that was a huge sentence to add to a mission. We did it a few years ago. And in the face of war, in the face of our connectedness with the global community, we simply must be this and live up to this challenge. So we've been asking the what-if question for ourselves for some time now as we have been developing our new museum. Here's a picture of what it will look like in a set of old market buildings. What if we demanded, when we did an architectural competition, that the architects worked with the big architectural firms, worked with small architectural firms? What if, through every single piece of procurement of our £337 million project, with every contract, can we embed diversity goals, commitment to the climate? What if we used our spending power as museums to make that change? It's going to open in 2026. What if we were more like London? Bustling, fast, dynamic, 24 hours, diverse. What if we began in the streets? What if we began in your homes? What if we celebrated what had gone before using an old building, and instead of building a new building completely, we use the qualities of the building to express a new sort of museum? What if we had multiple entrances, up to 9, not just one heroic one? What if we spilled out onto the street? What if the museum started on the roads of London, because we are the Museum of London? What if we worked with the building and didn't try to impose a huge grand design, but started to live in the building, fitting into it like a new set of clothes, not trying to make the building us, but we become a part of London? What if we thought about who we were from our collection upwards and analysed our collection going out into the night time, 24 hours? What if we structured our content around 3 dimensions, people, place and time, going into the future as much as into deep time? What if we took the general market and left residual evidence of what it was before? What if we embedded it across every part of our space? What if we used the shops outside, like with Centquatre, to form partnerships with others, such as these these shops around the outside are the ones that we will have partnerships, opening up our spaces to work with others. Because after all, we are not the only people to curate London. What if we had shops that were museum shops onto the street and views into the museum? What if we used every part of the museum to tell the content story of the museum? What if we had fun? What if we looked at the world through another's eyes? This is really weird. You can ask me about it later. This is a 3-story stable. London was driven by horsepower. And what if we walked in other people's shoes and did it for these people, the people who are the least engaged in society? I know that white middle-class people will continue to come to museums. I don't have to do anything about that. Where I really need to focus is people who do not currently come to museums, and that's where we're putting our energy. And we're working with people in developing all of this. The nice bits and the terrible bits. This says what they want London, the Museum of London to be is honest about London, including all the things that are shit. I've quoted directly. So we are bringing together 4 generations of people working in our organisation to bring the talent of those 4 generations who all work differently, have different expectations, together to create, or together with London, to create the best possible museum we can, using new technologies to become something like the kind of values that are embedded in a public park, open, accessible, used by everybody, with a kind of sense of freedom and liberalism. That means that nobody feels worried and anxious about engaging with our space. And we're having fun, not like this man who's doing his job here, but like these men who were creating a part of London in the 1970s. I don't know about health and safety at that time. As you can see, there was obviously no rules or regulations. We're thinking about the future, not a future like that, but maybe a future like this. This is artwork done by Didier Mattock-Brown, who envisaged possible future cataclysms in London to become London's shared space in the middle of it all. It won't be ever finished. It won't be ever completed because it's all part of a big, long, enduring dialogue with London itself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for these very inspiring thoughts about new criteria. So I think among our board members, there might be comments or questions to Sharon. Juliette, maybe you have some comments?
Je fais tout tomber, pardon.
I'm making everything fall. Well, first of all, I want to thank the organizers for allowing us to have this session that was important and to hear the words from Sharon. Personally, this morning I spoke about engagement, maybe not as long, not as strongly as Sharon, but I want to thank Sharon for the strength of her engagement, for her commitment, the strength of my dear colleague from the Museum of London, that the words that you've said that we needed to hear. I believe that what you've said could not have been said in the same way 2 or 3 years ago. It seems to me that we went through the past several years, we went through crises, health crises, climate crisis. I've said it and I'll say it again, and it's made us aware without us just being able to back down of it, of the urgency to act, the crisis that we're seeing with the return of war in the heart of Europe. All of this makes us aware of this urgency to act for sustainability. I'm using this word with the meaning that the UN gives it and the Agenda 2030. It's not just acting for the climate, but it's also acting for more equality, because we can't live in the world. There's no future for us if everybody doesn't find a space for themselves, and if we're not really deeply aware of what is at stake in terms of sharing, in terms of preserving. I work in a museum. I work in an international organization with museums. I'm humble, and I know I can't do everything. We need to do everything, but in order for all of us to take part in these actions, everybody needs to know the space that they occupy and what they can do. We can't all do something, but each of us can do something. And that's what I said earlier, and I'm saying it again because there are more people here than earlier. There's this awareness. And of course, we now, as museums, have the possibility, but also the obligation to be more virtuous with nature, to reduce our carbon footprint, but also to increase our mental footprint, because I think all of this is going to require a lot of creativity and a lot of intelligence. As museums, we were qualified this morning during the G20 of the culture of culture. We were told that we were credible, and because we are credible, we need to be aware that the visitors who come to see us, that are very numerous, there are 90,000 museums in the world. It's in the hundreds of millions. When they come to visit exhibition, they believe us. And if they believe what we're saying more than anywhere else, it's very pleasant, it's satisfactory, it's flattering, but it means that we're obligated. It means that we need to pay attention to what we're saying. And of course, we also need to be exemplary. We need to be virtuous, but we need to talk about these topics in our exhibitions. And I try to say it and convince my colleagues. Some are naturally convinced that we need to do with what we have. What do we have? We've got collections. We've got mediators who know how to speak to the visitors, even if the visitors don't know anything about the topics that they're coming to see. We're also impacting people in terms of their understanding and their emotion, and this creates action. And with these means that we have, we need to do everything in our power. And I'm saying this to all of my colleagues in our collections, because we have collections. We show them things that we guard, that we're very cautious with. Why are we cautious with them? Because we know that since we've had men and women on earth, they wanted to keep what they know and share it with future generations. And it's our role as museums to preserve. We don't preserve anything. We preserve authenticity. We preserve things as they are, real things. And I think that it's extremely important to tell our professionals that all of the collections have this notion of duration. They were assembled to be shared, to last. And there's no collection, whether it's art, history, or memory, that contains objects that remind us that nature exists, that remind us what being a man or a woman means, and that life is fragile. Maybe the time has come to go and look at our own connections and see what can be contributed in what I have to raise the awareness of my visitors, to see how this can last. I can see that I have a little sign that I need to move on. When we talk about our visitors, we also need to say that we need to increase our visitors. We don't need to look at their numbers. We also need to have a quality approach, touch more people, maybe not always the same people, because we know that we still impact mostly the same people. We say that there are 13% of people who go to museums, but we have people who come from very much further, from more diverse origins, from a socially and from an age perspective. So it's not just a question of quantity, but also quality. We need to ask ourselves what they know when they leave that they didn't know when they came back. What wouldn't they have lived if they hadn't come? This means that these instruments to measure our efficiency needs to change. I don't have the key, I don't have the solutions, but that means that all of the professionals in the rooms that are suggesting tools to improve the people that we have that also help us to design the tools for the people who come to visit us. And thank you for listening to me. Is it working? Yes, I just wanted to get back to what you were saying, Juliette, and to thank Sharon for what she said. It made me want to come and visit this museum and to talk about a new definition of success. I don't know if you can hear me. Yes. If we can go from quantity to quality, how are you going to evaluate the success of your museum? What are your criteria? What are you going to do? What is it going to bring to you?
I think museums have been trying to do this to find the golden metric. That means, aha, we have succeeded. I'm just going to make sure there aren't barriers to entry. I'm going to make sure that people feel comfortable about being in our space. I'm going to make sure we do great things. I mean, really great things. Because we know that that's what everybody enjoys. I want to take people to new places, elicit huge emotions, sadness, fear. That might be a bit difficult. Or we'll need a lot of support around it if we do that. I think museum people can become very earnest in wanting to do good. I think we should be very confident. And as you have both shown, great art, opening it up to people to do great things themselves, that's it. That's all we have to do. And we need to be confident. And I also am very convinced that the museums, it's almost like we need to know our place, and our place is as in part of the cultural infrastructure that exists in many countries, is about big ideas, not small ideas, big ideas, new insights, evidence or artistic output, and real stuff. That could be real new art, but real stuff. And it made me feel really sad when you talked about augmented or artificial, augmented reality. I want people to really go up a mountain, to really go into, be able to swim in the sea, the real sea, not to live their lives through portable devices. So, and I think now is the time for us to stop that being the only way in which people live.
I have a very brief comment. So thank you first to both of you. Very inspiring. And as you were already saying, I'd love to visit your museum. There's just one word. I mentioned we are a rather young institution. We are still building and shaping, and we're discussing a lot of big questions. Of course, one question is how to measure success. And we came up with, basically, we want to empower people. So we want people to feel empowered leaving our exhibitions. That's probably only one part of this, but by looking and speaking to many of the visitors and observing and also speaking to the artists and considering what artists really want. It's like giving something to people and people taking what they get from our exhibitions and take it outside, use it for themselves, feeling empowered, and do something with it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But we will I think we will go mad if we tried to measure that kind of empowerment number. How empowered were they before they came into the exhibition, and how empowered were they afterwards? That's, I think we just have to know that we do great stuff. know that museums are good. They're just good. And keep on being the institutions we are, and driven by the passions that you have. And you will empower people. End of. You'll just do it. And you can't measure it. And who knows, you know, you might have been one of 20 things in somebody's life. And it may happen 10 years from their visit. I don't know. And it's incremental. So I just think we have to keep on being and existing and doing great work.
Merci infiniment à vous.
Thank you all so much.